We are very glad to have the opportunity to join this webinar series. We are going to do a very brief presentation about our project in order to understand the close link that have our project with the objective of this series of webinar.
Pumpkin spice latte.
So could we ask everyone to please go on mute? Everybody please go on mute.
Pumpkin spice latte. Right?
Okay.
Except for you, Isabel.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So we are going to introduce very briefly what is the objective or CROWDTHERMAL project in order to understand what is the link with the objective of the and the support that our project can provide to the Northern Ireland objective to promote geothermal energy. One moment for some. Okay. The project facts it is that it's an Horizon 2020 project funded by the European Commission, and it's important to take in consideration a little the different topics that normally, especially the research people, we are working in a more specific area that it is we can say our area. However, this topic was already market update support. And with the focus area on building a low carbon climate resilience future. So this, we can say that it is already the call came a little out of the scope that normally we work with. But with this scope, we also try to understand how we can contribute. No? It is to do that, we take a look of the background and the challenge that we have at the EU level. As you know, Green Deal, it is the main, we can say, driver at this moment at the EU policy level, with the objective to become climate neutral by 2050. In short term, already for 2030, the objective, the challenge is to increase the representation of renewable energy until 55%. And to achieve this important objective, it's important to have all the packets, all the full packet of potential renewable energy system in the market, and increase the representativity of all of them. And in this aspect, as you know, geothermal energy still have a lot of work to do. This geothermal energy is still quite behind the objective. For example, for 2017, we're still only on 3% of the representation of renewable energy. And with this, we was thinking how CROWDTHERMAL can really provide support for that. We discovered that the important thing is if we involve the community in the participation in the development of geothermal project, that will be an important support, not only because we are going to receive funding by the communities, but also because at the policy level, we are going to understand better the important view for the community as well in the representation and the use of geothermal energy. So with this aim, we decide to work in this project. We are 10 partners in this consortium, leading by the European Federation of Geologists. But as already has been mentioned, we have a representation for a multidisciplinary team. So we have companies and universities that are involved, research centers that are involved more on social aspect. Then we have representation for financial aspect, and then also more technical, that we work for geoscientific side on the risk for geothermal project, etc. the representation, as you can imagine, it is a European project. We try to have a substantial representation at the European level. With the consortium and the involvement of the linked third parties. Linked third parties are members, in this case, of the European Federation of Geologists that contribute in the project to provide data and also to support with the dissemination of the output of the project. And then also we have an advice board. The advice board, again, is a multidisciplinary expert that came for the three main group of expertise that required in this project. So the CROWDTHERMAL aim to empower the European public to direct participate in the development of geothermal projects with the support of alternative financial schemes and an important engagement on social with social tools. So at the concept, it is already mentioned. So we have, in order to increase the participation of the communities on geothermal project, we need to evaluate the social aspect. It's not only to understand how we can involve the communities, but it's also to understand the view from the community on the geothermal energy, and understand the community in order to increase the acceptance and the engagement of the community. So this is the objective that we have in this pillar. Financial, it is to understand what, from all the different, we can say, models on the alternative financial model that can help us to involve with the community, what is the more appropriate financial model that will be accepted will be relevant for the geothermal project, but in particular for each of the project, geothermal project, the phase of the geothermal project and the community, what is the more appropriate system that we need to use. And the technique, I think mostly of you, when we speak about geothermal energy, we speak also about the risk. And it is, for the developers, one of the important barriers that they have, it is the financial aspect based on the risk system for geothermal aspect. And we try to work on how we can mitigate the risk for geothermal energy project, and especially think in the communities, because it's not only the risk for the developers, but also if we want to involve the communities, we need to have a maximum of guarantees. So far we have already worked on these three pillars, but at the end, what we want to have, it is a core service that put together all the outcome for these three pillars, and to work with important social media in order to really support the communities and other users as developers and local authorities to promote the geothermal energy for the community funding. All this is necessary to validate, and during all the project time until now, we have 3 case studies, one in Iceland, another in Hungary and Spain, that represent not only different geographical areas with different cultures, of course, but also different kind of project. So we have one shallow geothermal project, 2 shallow geothermal project in Spain. In Hungary, we have a very important project that it is a district heating, geothermal district heating, that will be one of the more, and it is transition. It is a district heating that came from the fossil fuel that will be changed to the geothermal energy progressively. And then Iceland, it is the big reference. No, it is for us. It's very easy to see that they need to be involved. But in this case, instead to be of classical use of geothermal energy for heating or power, we are focused on something more close to the community. So it is we try to work on a greenhouse that will be used for this one particular community, for their own use, for research, and also for the promotion of the region. So it is this is the three cases that help. We work with them, and now they are going to work with us to validate the core service. So the objective in the social aspect was to understand the requirement for the social licensing. So to arrive to that, it is I would like to mention that at the end, after many different deliberations that you can see here in green, we have arrived to the concept and to the real model for social license to operate for geothermal project. This is, we can say, the first time that we have this model. We are not going to present this today because this is really social license to operate. It is for the developers of the project. We have the deliverable, and if you are interested, we can keep in contact with you and we can inform more about this important product. But today we are going to focus more on the develop of public engagement approach. And I will like also to mention all the studies on synthesis on environmental factors for geothermal energy that we need to take in consideration when we came to this important pillar on social aspect. Okay. For another, in relation with the pillar of financial, first was to understand to review the successful case studies. So on financing or community funding, community funding. Georgie have selected from this interesting report that it was a very precise review of experience in Europe on this kind of finance model for renewable energy. She will present you some examples that could be a reference in your case. Then another objective was to review the regulation at the European level, because sometimes the existing regulation in different countries is already a barrier to have the opportunity to implement this kind of financial model. But and finally, it is a new approach for innovative financial mechanism for geothermal energy. This is also the focus of the presentation that Georgie will present to you. So this pillar, it is also, we can say, complete. And finally, it is all the aspect on relation of risk mitigation. We have also a good deliverable on alternative financial risk mitigation tool. And then the draft structure for plate type independent geothermal exploration risk mitigation scheme. It is an important deliverable also to provide all this information. So based on these three pillars that it is already complete with all the deliverable, we try to have this core service for project developers, local authorities, and public project users. And it is in these project uses where it is included the communities that can participate in the funding. For the public engagement, it's important to remember that to increase the involvement of to achieve all the objective of the energy transition, the community involvement is very important, and it is there where it is important to have the community, the co-ownership participation. Sorry, for some time. Okay. When we, the expert in the social aspect, take the pyramid of participation, This is the model, and as you can see, to arrive to have the participation of the community, we need to arrive on the top side of the pyramid with the cooperation and really real participation the community. It's fine. So
sorry, could everyone make sure they're on mute, please? Somebody's just sneezed into the microphone.
Good help. So to arrive to this part of the pyramid, what is important is to have financial, we think that the financial participation opportunity will help to arrive at this level of participation for the community. Another thing that I think it is relevant for this webinar today, it is the important literature review that was prepared as first deliverable from the social aspect on the acceptance of geothermal energy in both shallow geothermal energy over all the world. It's important, some of the aspects that it was considered, no? For example, it's important to understand the perception of the benefits. So financial benefits for the community is important to have. Possible cost reduction for energy and heat is important. Potential for regions, energy independency is crucial, I think, for this aspect. Renewability of the energy source, potential for district heating, creation of jobs, base of local capacity, climate protection, etc. But also it's important to understand the perception of the community of the cost risk. Included seismicity, high investment cost, the noise, the land subsidence, landscape change. Sometimes it's important to take in consideration as well, and potential negative aspect for the tourism, etc. Another important thing that I think for this report, it is the trust, that it is how important it is for to arrive for the geothermal project to have a trust relation with the authorities, with the project developer, and to the civil initiatives. So it is this report. It is also, I repeat, it is in our deliverable. It is the deliverable 1.1, and I think it is quite important for the objective of this webinar. So with that, with all this revision of the information, at the end we have like the conclusion that it is necessary to have a contextual analysis for to involve the community. The community and stakeholder analysis, historical context. I think it is already when you invite us to participate in this webinar, you have already a lot of information on the potential, the historical context to understand what is all the geothermal project can be linked for other mineral or oil and gas precedent project, and what is the confusion that can have, the vision, the political context, and knowledge on geothermal energy. This is crucial. It's important to really understand how much the community know about the geothermal energy in order to start the communication in the appropriate level. The method to participate, preparing the public engagement, it is a stakeholder map, media analysis, and interviews, surveys, etc. Here it is a little the guidelines for public engagement. All the actors that is necessary to take in consideration in order to have this well contextual analysis. Another thing that I think it is important to take in consideration, and we have in the pillar of social, we can take also this in the pillar, technical pillar, but because the environmental factors affect the society to affect or no the geothermal project, we have considered that this aspect need to be analyzed below the work package or the pillar on social aspect. So here you can see a little the graphic of the social or the environmental factors relevance. Here is the synthesis of all these environmental risks, and the deliverable that we produce for this in this context. It's important that we try to provide also some mitigation recommendations. So if you go there, you are going to find that from each of the deep geothermal energy or shallow geothermal energy, we have identified the different risks: atmospheric, water, land, soil, waste, and other. And we have identified how this risk can affect in each phase of the project: drilling, construction, operation, and the commissioning the project. And here you can see that we have identified some recommendations to mitigate the risk. So I am not going to go through all these aspects, but I think it is important that take in consideration this deliverable for your future work on the promotion, in the link of the promotion of the geothermal project with the potential existing risk. So I mentioned it before, we have worked on the three pillars: technical, financial, and social level. And since the beginning, we have the common structure for the project. We had the project definition, exploration, drilling. Of course, take a difference between, especially in deep geothermal energy, from the first well to the resource development. And then construction, operation, and the commission. So it is in each of them, we have identified all the relevant aspect that we need to take in consideration. This is also an important deliverable that you can find in our product on our deliverable with the name 3.2. This is a little to summarize. So it is at the end what we want. It is that the risk exists, but using the community funding, we can mitigate risk. And it is here it is, you can find a little the synthesis how alternative financial methods can contribute to mitigate the risk for geothermal energy. With that, I give the floor to my colleague, Georgie, that she will continue with all the financial aspect. And then I hope that we can have some time for discussion. Thank you. Georgie?
All right. Thank you very much, Isabel. Well, as you have been able to see in Isabel's presentation, or Isabel's part of the presentation, the main goal is to involve the community in realizing geothermal projects, and how can we do that? So I'm not going to talk about finance in general, because that's a very, I understand that finance is a very large issue when you're doing geothermal projects. But we're going to focus today on how we can use finance or new alternative finance to increase this involvement of the communities. I have a lot to say about other finance of geothermal projects, but then get back to me individually if you want to know more about that. So this is what we're going to focus on today. And the first thing we find is very important if you want to involve a community as a project developer or as a group of individuals who want to start a project, a geothermal project. There are first some questions you have to ask yourself, because the answers to these questions will be quite crucial in your success of the use of the alternative finance methods. And a number of relevant examples of questions are here, and these are actually the main questions. The first is your goal to increase the commitment of the community? So do you want to make sure that they're more involved in the project and that they're more committed to the project? There could be several reasons why you want to increase the commitment. You could want them to accept it better. You could want them to be active members of your project, or you can want to give them a say, and to give them a voice in the development of the project. We see a lot, not just in geothermal projects, but in a lot of governmental projects. If you give the community who live around it a say in the way the project is being developed and the choices that are being made, they are usually a lot more motivated and a lot more positive about the project, which is very important. Another reason to could be that you want the community to receive part of the benefits of a certain project. So, for example, it could be that you want them to get a reduction on their energy prices, or it could be that you expect your project to make a profit and you want them to share in the profit. And the third reason, of course, the first question you should ask yourself is, do you want to raise funds? And do you need extra funds for the project? All of these can be reasons why you want to involve the community through the use of alternative finance methods. And if you could give me the next slide, Isabel. There are a number of reasons or things that you can reach by using alternative finance, which you can maybe also reach in other ways, but are very reachable by using alternative finance. Of course, you can make the involvement of the community real, because they invest money or they invest time and they get a reward. And this reward can be financial, or it can be in form of cheaper energy, or it can be in the form of a heated pool that they can use. There are lots of ways in which you can involve them. By using alternative finance methods, you can also reach a larger part of the community. By using information or speech, etc., you can, of course, involve the community who lives around your project. But if you want to involve a larger community, the fintech methods that alternative finance use are can be very helpful to realize that. For example, in France, and also actually in the United Down project and another project in Germany, they raised money for their project through the community from all over the country. And the raising of the money was not the main goal. The main goal was to get everybody involved and motivated for the geothermal energy. And that worked. I will show you an example later when we see the cases. Another benefit is that you can realize more transparency, because the community is part of the project and they've invested to it. It gives them certain rights, and it also gives them a lot of information about the project. It also can keep them involved from the beginning, and can mean that they know when, for example, certain decisions are made and which can influence them, and they can still influence them when they're made. Because a lot of the alternative finance models are fintech models, right, which means they work online. It's very easy to make it customer friendly. It is easier to comply with regulation because, of course, if you want to raise money from the public, there's a lot of regulation that you have to comply with. If any of you have questions on that, I would like to refer you to deliverable 2.2 of the Crowdthermal project, which explains in quite a lot of detail what this regulation is. But if I explain that here now, we're still going to be here in 3 hours and everybody's going to be asleep, and we don't want that either. It also gives you a very good way to communicate with the community. You can lower the costs of raising capital because it's all digital online. And of course, you have the possible benefits for the community, which I talked about earlier. Right, Isabel, you can give me the next slide, please. Isabel showed you a figure before, and we've kind of changed that figure into this figure because we would like to show you that the financial instrument that you choose and the financial instrument that you use will have a large effect on the social side of your project. So it will have an effect on the acceptance of your project. It will have an effect on the public engagement, the way the public is involved in your project. And it can also have, through these two, have an influence on your social license to operate as a developer. For example, if you use an alternative finance method, which gives your community a part of the profit or a cheaper energy price, they will of course be, or usually be more accepting of the project, and they will also be motivated to help it because it has a direct effect on them. So it's important to realize that the financial instrument that you use, because there are a lot of instruments that you can choose, but the financial instrument that you use will affect these three social sides of your project. And for example, even just sending out a survey, which is actually something I learned from the social side in this research project in Crowdthermal, already affects the way your community thinks about the project, because they're being asked about it, they're being involved. So it's really important to look at all the social aspects of what you do. And of course, this is doubly so for this financial instrument, because they will invest money in most cases. There will be some risk, as Isabel already referred to, but there will also be involvement and a possibility to say what they want and to help the way the project develops. So if you look at the consequences of the involvement that you can realize, there are some pointers I would say, and they are written here. So if you want to increase this commitment of your community, it's very important that they feel involved. And they are only involved if the financial instrument that you choose fits the risk they want to take and the return they would like to receive. Of course, that's always a big discussion because everybody or most people want low risk and a high return, but that's not feasible. But because you have different instruments and then you can combine them with different risk mitigation methods, you can try to come as close to this risk return wish that the public has, so that they really feel involved and the instrument matches them. And the second thing you should think about, if you want to give them a say, so if that's your goal, you want them to give them a voice, then you need to give them voting power. So the instrument that you have should be an instrument that gives them voting power. So for example, equity, or if you make them part of a cooperative, will give them voting power. The third point, which I already mentioned shortly, is that you have to look at the risk of the project, which is very important because it influences everything for this community. There's an example here, but I think that's too long to explain that now. And the fourth one is if your actual need is to raise funds, then involving a risk method can be very useful because that means that you can get the community to invest into your project. And that means that other stakeholders, larger stakeholders, will also often invest. So what is important for this point here is that if you get your community involved, and if they are involved through alternative finance, it's a very positive sign to other stakeholders that your project is actually wanted and that it's supported, and it helps to get other finance, which I hopefully have time to show you also in one of the case studies. All right, so that's, I see, will I discuss the risk more? If I have time, yes, I will, but we're a bit short on time. All right, Isabel, if you can give me the next slide, please. I've included this because I shortly wanted to show you, we've written a whole deliverable about this. So if you want to involve the community and if you want to do it through alternative funding, how should you do it? And what are the steps that you should take? And these steps are actually quite important because what the dangerous thing is, what you often see is that project developers or communities think, oh, great, let's use alternative finance because it's positive for everybody, let's go for it. And they pick one and they think, okay, crowdfunding, I've heard most about that. That's what I'm going to do. But they haven't really thought if that instrument really matches their goal. So the first thing you should do is define your involvement goals. Why do you want to involve the community and what do you want to achieve by it? The questions that I started with are actually the questions you should answer for yourself. What is your reason to involve the community? The next step, very important, is what is exactly the community that you're trying to involve? Are they just the people who live around it? Is it a larger group? Do you want to actually involve all people who are positive about sustainable energy, etc., etc.? These can, and it's very important which community you pick, which instrument matches your goal best. Third one then is, what is the risk profile of the community? Like we said, or what I've learned, of course, because I didn't know a lot about geothermal projects before we started the project, that in some phases the risks are really, really high. And that risk, maybe a project developer or government can carry that risk, but small investors can only carry that risk if they only invest a small part of their income. If they start investing larger parts, they shouldn't, the risk should really be mitigated and be handled, because the risk can be too high and they can lose an essential part of their income. So what is really important here is that you look at the context of your community. It was already part of Isabel's presentation about the public engagement. You look at their historical context. You look at what is their social position, what's their financial position, what is their education level. Can they really assess the risk that they are taking? You will see, if you look at the regulation around finance, around community finance, a lot of that regulation handles if the community can actually assess the risk that they are running, that the project contains for them. So this is very important to look at. The fourth step you then make is you look at what is the appropriate risk level. What is the risk that the community can actually absorb, and how does this risk influence the goals of your project? And the fifth step that you then make is you look at the finance and risk mitigation options, and there's a lot of options that you can run. Yes, I'm going to skip this one because I'm taking too much time. So, but maybe you can look at it because it showed you what steps you have to do to look at the risk profile that is suited to your project. So this is the preparation that you have to do. And if you have done this, then there are a large number of alternative finance methods that you could use. Here we have put together a short presentation of the alternatives on headlines. Most of you will have heard from crowdfunding, which is where a community invests directly into a project. Another option is direct lending, which is, it's like lending from a bank, but it's from institutions that are not banks. So they can be more flexible in their financing. You can lease it. The community can be involved in a leasing structure, or a government can pre-finance a project and then lease it back to the community. Match funding is a very popular option, where you raise some funding from a certain party and a government or an NGO or someone else matches that funding with funding by themselves, because then they are sure that there is a commitment. You can have reward or output-based funding, which is where the people who fund you, it can be a community or well, banks don't usually do it, but it can be a community or a direct lender or other parties, and they only get a return in the form of products like a pool they can swim in, or a reduction on their energy price, or only get a reward or a return when you have actually realized output. Then of course you can go for donations, which is, well, the best financing you can get, but they're quite hard to come by. You're gonna have revenue-based financing, and another really interesting model that you can have is a steward ownership, where the community actually becomes the owner of the project together with the project developer and with the government. So these are all options you can use, and you can combine them with the supporting instruments which you see in the middle, which can be decentralized finance, which is a lot about smart contracts. It means that you, well, it's too much to explain it here now, but it's an instrument to help you make contracts more easily and cheaper. You can use guarantees by governments or by other organizations which mitigate the risk. And in some countries, we also have fiscal instruments, which means that the government will give you this deduction of your fiscal bill if you invest into a project like this. So these are all the instruments that we have and that are able to be used in the project. For the different phases in the project, and normally you look, where do I want to involve the community and where do I need the funding? And then into different phases of the project, you use different kind of funding. I don't have time to go into that now, unfortunately, but there are 4 types of funding which you can use. You can have risk absorbing funding, risk sharing funding, you can have debt, or you can have reserves. And they all are different kind of funding that you can use in your project. Yeah, so Isabel, go on to the next one, it's okay. So these are the steps we have, you have to make if you want to involve the community for alternative finance. And it can be done very successfully. And to show you how, I have included 6 case studies which have been realized in Europe in the last years, which have all been very successful, and which might show you or give you an example of how you could use it in your projects. One interesting project was in France, in the neighborhood of Paris. They only used the community financing after the permits were already realized, so the risk was actually not so high anymore. They started with a small group of investors who lived close by, who are all very committed to the project, a small community, and then they gradually expanded it. And by doing so, they were able to realize quite a lot of money in quite a short period of time. And it is going to supply 10,000 households with energy. So it's actually quite a large project, and it's a very interesting project. Here you see shortly what the project realized. And because we're out of time, I'm just going to select a project, which I will also explain to you. And that is the, let's see.
Hey, Georgie.
Yes.
Georgie, as long as we just leave 5 or 6 minutes for questions, we've
Right.
still got 10 minutes.
All right. Okay. Oh, then I can do two. Okay, good.
Yeah, good.
So this one actually is very interesting. This was in the Netherlands. This was a small community. It was a village, and they needed a new energy source for the village to generate heat for 2,500 households. They had already done a project before in a city close by, and it's been very successful. So here they wanted to combine different kinds of sustainable energy to realize the energy for this project. And what was very interesting about it is that the government gave a subsidy for the startup of the project, but the ownership will actually be in the hands of an energy collective, so of the community itself. And they will run it. So they are a very committed community. And because the government subsidized the first phase, most of the risk was already gone. So after that, they could get the financing by the community on board in the form of equity. And the form of equity is, if there's not a lot of risk involved anymore, can be a very attractive form, because it gives maximum say to the community, because they actually get the shares, they actually own the project. And if there is a return, a positive return, it also goes directly to the community. So that's also a very interesting option to use. Maybe you can go to the next one, Isabel. Yes, this is quite a famous project. I think it's from the United Kingdom, where they finance a large geothermal project. And part of it was also financed by the community. Here they used a loan, so debt financing, to get the community on board. And they actually raised the money really quick from the community. But what they did, they started with the local community, and then they, like in France, and then they increased it. So in, let's say, the first 2 days, only the local communities could invest, and then after that, the rest of the community. So within 10 days, they had the whole amount of money that they needed from the community. Unfortunately, this is also an example of where they actually used the wrong form of alternative finance, because they used debt financing, which was a very good match to the community's wishes, but it was not a good match to the wishes or the needs of the project, because the project still had high risk on board. In the end, the project had to refinance the community part through another financing. So this is actually an example where it was very successful, but for the project itself, it was not an ideal match, because they hadn't looked at their own risk position before that. Right, there are 3 other cases. I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to leave them. You can look at them. If you look at all the deliverables that we have described all the financial instruments in more detail, and the cases are also in there in more detail. So I hope this will help you to reach your own communities and use alternative finance. Some main lessons which I've mentioned during my talk are these. And I hope you can also use them to make your financing more effective.